Hello, everybody. Now, there's been a furore in Scotland over the last few weeks, which is about this gender recognition bill that the SNP and the Greens have brought in Scotland with the help of a couple of representatives also from Labour and the fake Conservatives, although some of them in Holyrood, the Scottish Parliament, voted against it. But either way, it is a real disaster and absolute woke nonsense for Scotland and its culture and its society if this bill goes through. But what we've heard yesterday is that Westminster is going to block the bill under Section 35 of the Scotland Act, which is a power in that Westminster has that is rarely used, but is used in extreme circumstances when the Parliament in Scotland goes beyond the powers that it has, or when it tries to bring in a law that conflicts with Westminster law that applies to the whole of the United Kingdom. And that's the case in this situation. So what this Scottish gender recognition bill does, absolutely terrible. It says that children over the age of 16, as well as adults, but down to the age of 16, you can legally change your gender from male to female or female to male, etc. Well, no, not etc. There's only two genders, or there's two sexes. You see, subconsciously I pick up this language. But, you know, the reality is there are two sexes, male and female. Gender is an artificial construct. First, created and fabricated by John Money, an American professor in the 1950s, and then it's got broader and broader in use, and it's now been mainstreamed, and people talk about gender rather than biological sex. But there is really, in reality, there's just two sexes. And gender is something superfluous, you know. So, but the law says, or that this law that they want to bring in would say that you can change your gender from the age of 16 legally after just 3 months of living as the other gender, whatever that actually means. Sorry, it's 6 months from 16 to 18, but 3 months living as the other gender as an adult from 18 onwards, without any diagnosis or consultation with a doctor whatsoever. So it's basically a self-declaration that you are a different gender to what you were before, even though, no, I would not recognize that as a concept. You know, there's sex, as I said, biological sex. The law as it stands applies to the whole of the UK, and it comes from Tony Blair's time. Now, that's confusing enough. In 2004, they implemented and passed the Gender Recognition Act that applies to England, Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland, that says after 2 years of living as the other gender and with a diagnosis from a doctor, you can have a legal gender reassignment. So that would need some kind of diagnosis of gender dysphoria. Now, the thing is, doctors now routinely will give these, you know, just as a formality, as a matter of course. Perhaps they didn't back in 2004, which is getting on for 20 years ago now. And, you know, as culture has changed and these things have been promoted and propagandized, then they've become more and more commonly portrayed in mainstream media and so on. So you'd think actually that, you know, every second person is had a gender reassignment, when actually it's only a tiny, tiny percentage of 1%, tiny number of people. It gets a lot more airtime and coverage than the number of people, the proportion of people for whom this is an issue. But the problem with the law here is that, you know, what they want to bring in Scotland would then contradict with an existing law that will still apply to Scotland. So there will be two different laws, one in Westminster, one from Holyrood, both applying to an area of the United Kingdom, which contradict each other. So that cannot be. You cannot have one law that says you need a diagnosis of gender dysphoria and you have to spend 2 years living as the other gender, and then another law from another place that says you don't need a diagnosis and you only need 3 months living as the opposite gender, and down to 16 rather than 18. And 16, obviously, 6 months rather than 3 months. So you can't have this contradiction. So, I am no fan of the fake Conservative government in Westminster, but they've been essentially forced to do this because it is a question of contradiction of law, and whatever issue it would be, it could be something completely different. They would have had to realistically implement Section 35 of the Scotland Act to overrule this law that they want to bring in Scotland, which contradicts a law that would still exist in the same territory. So that simply cannot stand. Now the thing is, people are celebrating. This is a good thing. They've been forced to do this. It's a good thing that this Scotland gender recognition bill is now going to be overruled, but they're going to try to take it to the court, I guess the Supreme Court, and they'll have to make a decision on who is allowed to get their way, whether it's going to be the Westminster government or the Scotland government. I'm no fan, as I said, of the fake Conservatives, because they actually wanted to bring something in like this for the whole of the United Kingdom in Theresa May's time. They were going to have a new Gender Recognition Act, which would be, exactly like this, that would allow self-declaration of gender with basically no time at all. You just say, right, I'm a woman now, and legally you're a woman. That's what they wanted to bring in. Now, as I said, I'm no fan of Johnson, Truss and Sunak. They are appalling fake Conservatives, but occasionally, even people who are absolutely dreadful do something that is not as dreadful as somebody else who's more dreadful. And that's kind of what is the case at the moment, with them blocking this bill in Scotland. I mean, even Keir Starmer, the leader of the Labour Party, who is equally as dreadful as Johnson, Truss and Sunak, perhaps a little bit more so, as he's even said that this gender recognition bill goes too far, as he says, because a lot of feminists are very, very unhappy about this, because it is going to create problems for vulnerable women who might have big burly men just declaring that they're a woman and then going into women's facilities all over the place. And that is not going to be a good situation at all. So I think a lot of the people who are opposing it on that basis. And that's, absolutely right. I'm opposing it because it's just completely crazy and insane. And any society that has got any link to reality would not be doing this kind of thing.